Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I'm looking for smiles. There are a few of you. Some of you were smiling. Others were curious why I was looking at you. It's good to see you all. It's good to see you all. Today is March 8th, and it's kind of a slightly harder morning in America, or some states in America, right? We lose an hour. In one sense, I like to think of it as we travel into the future, right? It's something beautiful, something wonderful. And I'm part of a graduate school, HJI, and this is the most confusing time for students because you have students from around the world, and all of a sudden, the class starts and there's almost nobody in the class, just the Americans. And then you have 1 hour later, the international students tuning in, and so it's a very interesting practice. But it's wonderful. It's something we can celebrate. I just found out today is also the International Day of Women, so let's celebrate that together, shall we? Yeah. Thank you, Susanna. And also, it's been a while. I know that there was a lot going on the past couple of weeks, and especially in Korea, there was the WCLC conference, the International Leaders Conference, and our Cheonshimon pastor, Dr. Kim, just returned from Korea and Chicago, and so let's welcome him back here as well. Welcome back, Dr. Kim. But also, something major within our movement. Many of you may have seen the news that our movement in Japan lost a court case and is facing dissolution at this time. It's the first Sunday where many of our church members in Japan won't be able to go to church. They'll have to gather in their own homes, and so it's very sad to think about. Our president, Reverend Dunkley, sent out a message to all of our members around the country, and I felt it was a message of hope. And it was a message of appreciation because this time we're able to reflect deeply on the impact and the influence of the Japanese movement for the sake of the world. We said today is International Day of Women, and Japan happens to be the mother nation. And so, actually, before we begin, can we all just rise and give a hand to our Japanese members who have continued to advance this movement forward, uniting with our true parents? Thank you. You may be seated. But as I think about what's happening, I can't help but also think about how God might be working through this. In many ways, it reminds us that we are not just an organization. We are not an institution. In fact, when we look at the history of Christianity, the major problems in the church started when it became largely institutionalized, right? You had the golden ages, and then all of a sudden, the start of the dark ages began. So, in one sense, this may be a call to the purity of who we are as children of God. And so, let's pray for our movement as a whole, that we can come together to connect to our original essence. Today's message, entitled On the Brighter Side. Now, many times I think of the phrase brighter side, and it comes up a little bit trite. Because sometimes this is said in times when you don't want to hear that. Right? Maybe things are not going so well. And the reality is that we all face challenges in one way, shape, or form in our lives. There are many of our own members, many people around the world today who don't know if they're going to live to see tomorrow. There are people who have come up and have found out that they have developed some kind of terminal illness. It's hard to think about the good in life when your bank account is drawn down to zero, right? When you're in debt. It's hard to see the brighter side of things when perhaps you just got fired from work. That's the reality of life. There's constant conflict. Yesterday I was doing one of my assignments for school, and the class is called Conflict Analysis and Transformation. And one of the prevailing topic in what I was reading was why conflict transformation. Throughout life, we hear a lot about conflict resolution, right? We hear about bringing conflict, managing conflict, but why transformation? The author made a case where life is filled with conflict. When you go into different regions of the world, the conflict between France and Niger, the conflict between various different countries, many people actually don't like to hear the word conflict resolution because it means that we're going to put an end to the conflict, and especially those who feel oppressed. But rather, it helps us to be able to see things from the perspective of the necessity of conflict in our lives. Because when any form of dissonance, any form of anything that is slightly different, that challenges that, is a form of conflict. And it provides an opportunity for us to be able to move forward into something greater harmony. And so it was a very interesting topic overall. And so I thought it also tied to the brighter side. But why is this phrase prevalent in the world? It has a lot to do with the fact that life can seem quite gloomy many times. When we read the Bible, it's very gloomy in many places. Yesterday I was with our youth, and I was teaching them a bit about the Bible. Some of them had never seen a Bible or touched a Bible before, and so we just talked about the Bible. And some of them wondered, why did God cleanse the world on one occasion? Why is it that the good God would bring destruction to certain cities, a certain land? It's a good question, right? And this question can be answered in many ways. This question, you can find different angles to answer it based on historical evidence, based on just philosophical queries. But this time I decided to share with them the reality of the world before God had some form of calamity wipe certain parts of the world. And I just told them a story about Lot, Abraham's nephew. Many of you may know the story of Lot and his wife. When we're younger, we hear about his wife turned into a pillar of salt. I still couldn't understand what that meant, a salt. But as you get older, you read the story again, and it's a very, very intense story. This is a story that starts with the separation of Abraham and Lot. They were traveling together, and one day their herd grew so big that they decided to go their separate ways because their herdsmen were fighting with each other. Lot chose the area where there was water, green pastures, and Abraham went the other way. One day, God came to Abraham and he said that he has plans to destroy the city of Sodom and Gomorrah. And Abraham pleaded with God. He said, "Is it not unjust to kill the righteous with the unrighteous?" And Abraham pleaded with God that if only 50 people, right, were righteous, would you save the place? And then God said yes. He went down to 40, 30, 20, 10. It was so hard for Abraham to come down to a number. The reality was the city was not filled with righteousness. But what does that mean, that the place was unrighteous? And we hear the story continue, starting with two angels walking into the city of Sodom. These angels walk through the gates. And Lot sees these two angels, and Lot welcomes the angels to his house. The angels refused at first, but Lot insisted. They were intending to sleep at the town square. But Lot insisted. Back in the day, it was tradition to take care of travelers, because if travelers were left out, they're exposed to the element, you can die. And so it was very honorable to take care of travelers. So Lot brings them into the house, he washes their feet, he gives them food and a place to rest. But what happens when night falls? Lot hears knocking on his door. He goes to the door and he says, all the men of the city had gathered, and they were demanding that Lot brings out those two men who came by in the day. You read very clearly, they were intending to rape these men. It's kind of a very obscure thing in the Bible. And in the day, honor was more important than your life. And it was very dishonorable to house guests and something bad happened to them. So Lot pleaded with them to turn a blind eye to this and to go away. So much so that he even offered his own daughters. But they said no. They wanted those two men. And so Lot wouldn't let them, so they pressed them against the door. The angels grabbed his hand, brought him back in, and they told him why they were here. That they were here to put an end to this city of unrighteousness. So when we read that story, it's very grim. But also it tells us the tale of a city, an atmosphere where many of us probably would not want to live in. It seems like a very desolate land, desolate place. And this is just one example of the wickedness of the earth. So, in one sense, it puts into perspective the happenings of the Bible. I don't think there's any justification, but it puts things into perspective. But when you read those stories, sometimes it's hard to see good. Life is filled with so much that is evil. Yesterday I was exercising in the morning, I was playing basketball, and then someone scratched my nose. And I just started bleeding. I put concealer on so you don't see it. Actually, I bought this concealer for the first time during my blessing a couple years ago. I never used it since, and so I'm glad I still found it. Yeah, I got scratched, and then it's painful. It's not something that I'm a fan of, but you focus on that pain. Something happens to your body, and you just focus right there, right? Typically, many of us don't celebrate our health until something goes wrong. And this is an evolutionary trait. It's called the negativity bias, right? The reason is because in life, focusing on the negative got you to survive. It's normal. It's natural. Because think of the time where the cavemen or humans long time ago hearing the rustling of the bushes and thinking it was the wind didn't get you so far. But being more precautionary got you to survive. It's an evolutionary bias. So we focus on the problems. We want to make things better. However, this mindset of focusing on what's negative doesn't bring true joy to us. It seems almost unnatural, but this is the reason why Father, Mother tells us all the time to focus on gratitude. Because humans have the natural tendency to focus on what's not so great. And there's a very beautiful story in the Bible illustrating how things that we see as not so good can be a blessing. and how God can work through that. And the most probably prevalent example of it is the story of Joseph. When we read the story of Joseph, it's very simple. Joseph is the son of Rachel. Rachel is Jacob's favorite wife. But Joseph is the 12th born son, 11th. So what happens is that Jacob loves Joseph more than his brothers, right? And he makes it very obvious. He gives him a beautiful robe of many colors. And so his brothers hate him. His brothers hate him because we're older. Why does our father like Joseph? But we understand it, right? I think many of us can understand just feeling lack of love. But Joseph's brother went to the extreme where a solution suggested was to kill Joseph. But instead, on one account Reuben, another account Judah, decides to preserve the life of his brother and say, Reuben says, why don't we just put him in a pit that later Reuben will come and save him. And then later Judah says, instead of killing him, why don't we sell Joseph to the passing Ishmaelites? So the story continues that Joseph is sold and he's taken to Egypt. And he's put inside the house of the chief of the guards, right, Potiphar. Now Joseph serves there as a servant, but because God's grace is with him, everything he does is abundant. When he cares for the flock, they multiply. Everything he does is good, is blessed. So Potiphar loves him, but Potiphar's wife likes Joseph. She falls in love with Joseph. There's a time when she tries to kind of push herself onto Joseph, but Joseph runs away. So she grabs onto Joseph's clothes and then uses to accuse Joseph of having forced himself onto her. So what happens? Potiphar comes home. His wife tells him that what Joseph had done, or what she said Joseph had done. And Joseph is put into prison for years. At least 2 years, according to the Bible. And he's not sure why he's there. His saving grace comes when the king had sent a cupbearer, and the king has sent a baker to the prison. And then he interprets both of their dreams, and the dreams become true, and the king finds out, wait a minute, there's a great guy in the prison who can translate dreams, because the king had a dream, he wanted to translate it, right, interpret it. And so the story is basically of how a young boy gets sold away by his brothers, who originally had the intent of killing him, to being recognized by the king and made second in command in all of Egypt. And as a result of the interpretation, Joseph tells him there'll be 7 years of plenty and then 7 years of famine. Joseph is put in charge of taking care of all the crops, making sure there's enough food for when the famine comes, and Joseph makes the kingdom abundant because there's plenty in the store, plenty to look after, and they sell the food. And through that, one day in the years when there was famine, his own brothers come for food. They come in to buy. They don't recognize who Joseph is. And long story short, Joseph has all of them move to Egypt so he could take care of them. But the brothers were still worried that Joseph had not forgiven them. And so one day, when Jacob died, Jacob, the father of Joseph, they embalmed him for 40 days. They took him to bury him along with Abraham and Isaac and their wives. And after burying Jacob, the brothers went to Joseph and they asked for forgiveness. They thought that now that their father is gone, that Jacob might enact his own revenge. And this was Joseph's response. He said, "You intended to harm me, But God intended for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. It's a hindsight thing. But it's very clear from that story that God used Joseph to preserve the lives in that area through the 7 years of great famine, to preserve the lives of Jacob and his children. So there are many times where things in our life don't make sense. And that's normal. It's hard to think about what something could mean when things aren't going so well, when it's painful, when it aches. But the reality is that for many of us in our lives, when we look at it in hindsight, we can see the blessing of it all, right? It's normal. But even though we see the blessings of the lives we lived in the past, it's hard to put that forth in what's happening today. How many of you go through challenges pretty frequently or are going through some kind of challenge today? Right, many of us. Many of us. Some of you have our hands really wide up. We're all challenged. We're all struggling. The world is imperfect, and we are imperfect. So there's no need to act perfect. Right? There's no need to act perfect, but we strive. There's a book I read by Brendon Burchard, and he makes one point at the end. The book is called High Performance Habits, and he uses this book to describe people in this world who are highly performing. That means think of someone who, whatever they do, they're successful at. But beyond success, are happy, are fulfilled, are generous. He studied, this is over 60,000 people or something of that sort. And he found that one of the key traits of them was that they were satisfied. Interesting. Right? He shares an account of, there's one day where he had to go up to the stage and give a speech, but before he was going up to the stage, there was a rock star on the stage who's very passionate. And his main point was, never be satisfied. Always strive for more. Be hungry. And then Brendon is on the side, just a bit perturbed, because the first slide on his presentation is be satisfied. So he's out there thinking, wait, okay. He doesn't want to make this person feel bad, but he wants to get this point across. And I think many of us can relate to what the rock star talked about. Actually, it's very popular in pop culture, just contemporary culture. Never be satisfied, right? It sounds great. You're grinding. Recently, I went to, not recently, but actually recently, I went to New York City. And I used to live in New York for 10 years, or a little more than that. But when I went back into New York City and I was in the subway, it brought back this feeling I used to have. Because in New York City, it's not like people are sitting in the subway smiling all the time, right? Like people have got their heads down, maybe they're on their phone. Many times they're trying to catch some sleep. Right? You can feel the energy. And actually, I like that energy. it's kind of everyone's hustling and grinding. That's the feeling of New York City. Because everybody's on the subway. You know, you're rich, poor, wherever, everybody's on the subway. And you're trying to make things happen, right? That's just, it feels infectious. Let's do it. Let's keep going till our heads fall off or whatever. Just that mindset of grinding, and never be satisfied. But Brendon says statistics show that the most highly performing people, the high performers, are happy and are satisfied. So it's interesting. After the rock star came off stage and Brendon spoke, after Brendon came down, his rock star told him, so I guess you must be satisfied. And Brendan says, yes, but I didn't want to dissuade the point that you made. I think it's very important for us to strive. And then the conversation just went on as you would expect it to. 3 months later, this rock star checked himself into a mental institute. But the point is, in life, no matter how hard we strive, we're meant to live in it. Be grateful with what we have, because that is what's going to give us sustainable energy for the future. It's so important to appreciate the present, to appreciate all that we have. Being satisfied doesn't mean you never strive, but it's knowing that what you have is enough. What you have is good. It's appreciating the blessings that you've gotten to this moment. Because if you say, never be satisfied, what happens? When are you going to be satisfied? And actually, Brendan asked the guy, when are you going to be satisfied? And he says, well, I don't know. That's the reality of life. Right? We have to be grateful. And when we're joyful, it brings greater blessings into our life. And there's a manifestation of that physiologically. Anyone ever heard of, if you're not feeling so happy, try to smile? Right? It doesn't sound great when someone tells you that when you're unhappy. But it works. It works. All the time, every time. There are many times where I'm just stressed out of my mind, right? And like even before I come up on stage many times, I'm just thinking of a number of different things, but then you just try to smile and it just changes everything. Physiologically, it gives you energy. It just makes you happier. It's so interesting. So it's almost as if when we try to bring something positive into the moment, we become positive. There are many people who walk around with little bracelets that says, bring the joy. Bring the joy. That means wherever you go, you are the agent of joy. Because how many times are we all waiting for someone to just come and make us happy? Right? We enter into a meeting room, we enter into whatever setting it is, and we just go there with what we just went through. But how different would it be if we intentionally try to bring in joy? It changes everybody's spirit, right? I think many of us know someone who is very jolly and joyful all the time. They're smiling all the time. And I know a number of you who are here just like that. It's infectious. And so, I'd like to read some words from the Chonsung Young father. He says, God's greatest blessing do not come in beautiful packaging. They come disguised as profound hardships and trials. Those who look only at the outward appearance will complain, become discouraged, and run away. But those who endure with absolute faith and gratitude will unwrap the hardship and discover the tremendous blessing God has hidden inside. He continues on to say, if you view your path of suffering as a curse, it will destroy you. But if you digest your suffering with a heart of gratitude, it becomes the ultimate fertilizer for your soul. The deeper your sorrow, the higher your capacity for joy will be. It's amazing how our challenges in life bring us forward to be able to serve in greater capacities. Sometimes I watch prisoner ministry. And this is a ministry where people who have been to prison before, typically, a number of them become pastors, and they go back to prison. And it will surprise you how many prisoners gather for those meetings. I met one of our newer members, and he told me that while he was in prison, he read through the Bible over 7 times, front to back. Prison ministry. And when you see how this former inmate, now a minister, ministers, there's so much passion. There's so much
strength that comes from it. So different than if I went, or if many of us went to the prison, that we couldn't have that impact. The reason is because this person is speaking from a place of understanding. This person understands what it took to get there, and also what it took for their spirits and their hearts to be saved, right? And they do it like someone else couldn't. They turned what was a challenge in their life into a blessing for others. When I was younger, I've been involved in youth ministry for some time now. And I remember many times you'll have testimonies. And I'd hear a testimony of some other member of the church to the young people, and they would share stories about how they used to have a serious drug issue or relationship issue or alcohol issue, whatever it is, and then they found God through that. And that they're determined to live a life that's centered on the heart of our God, Heavenly Parent. And I remember listening to all those testimonies, I was like, wow, this is amazing. And now, mind you, I'm listening from the perspective of a staff member too, not a participant just listening. But then, to be honest with you, many times I felt jealous because I didn't have that experience to pull from. Does that make sense? I felt that gave them this fuel and power. It was so interesting how you think, and I was much, much younger back then. But it's true. If you've been through something, your level of empathy for someone else who's been through the same thing is much different than someone who has never experienced it before. And so no matter how difficult your life is today, it gives you that perspective. It gives you that heart to care. Someone who's been homeless before understands what it takes to be homeless, understands what it feels like, and so tends to be more generous. My father, as a peace-loving global citizen, one of the parts that moved me when I was younger reading that book was he talked about how in order to be a leader, you need to be a beggar. You need to learn what it's like to be on the streets, what it's like to be treated like filth, because how can you understand the people who are if you've never been there? But when we're in those situations, many of us might shy away. Of course, it's difficult. I've never been on the street begging before, but I have fundraised. I think many of you have fundraising experience. And in some ways, sometimes it feels like that, right? People will, call the police on you because you're soliciting. Some people will just act like they're not even seeing you, right? But even though that experience, it's so far away from what Father described as being a beggar, I felt truly humbled. And I could understand what it feels like for someone to strive for something greater and be ignored, and be rejected. And so, let's appreciate those difficult moments, those difficult times. Mother shares in Champumogyong. She says, no matter how fierce and freezing the winter blizzard may be, it cannot stop the coming of spring. In fact, it is only by enduring the bitter cold of winter that the roots of a tree can grow deep into the earth. The difficulties you face today are not the end. They are simply the winter of your life, preparing you to blossom into a new spring of hope. Do not let the darkness of reality blind you to the bright future heaven is preparing. Sometimes, when darkness comes upon us, we feel defeated. And many times we can stay defeated, but almost all the time it's just a season of our life. We're meant to learn from that. We're meant to grow from that. Our president, Donald Trump, I think when this was probably in 2016, when he made the comment of a loan of $1 million, many people made fun of that, right? Why did people make fun of a loan of $1 million? Because they just felt that it was just a bit out of touch, right? Many people would benefit from a loan of $1 million. If you're in that world, you understand that that's not as much to do what you want to do. But it's the reason why it can feel a bit disconnected is because some people might feel that he might not understand the common struggle of the people, right? And that's the reason why you have other candidates who also gain prominence overall. The reality is that it's much easier when we experience life and can empathize with the people who have gone through similar things that we have as well. So let's look on the brighter side. In Philippians 4:8, it says, this is Paul, it says, "Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things." And he's not writing this letter from the comfort of his home. He's writing this from his holding cell. He's writing this from a place before he gets killed. This is what he says. And he could have shared his struggle. He could have shared his pain. He could have shared how unjust it is for him to be in this cell, where all he did was preach the gospel to the people. But he says, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Let's fill our minds with goodness. Let's fill our minds with what is positive. Let's fill our minds with the essence of God's work. Because God is working through each and every one of us. And the most moving stories in the Bible are not stories that happen very simply. God told Abraham, I'll make great nation of you. Your descendants will be blessed, and all who come in contact with your descendants will be blessed. But he didn't have a child. His own wife was barren, Sarah. But out of a barren woman came Isaac. Out of the story of a barren woman came this great nation. It's not just one nation. Abraham is the father of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Islam and Christianity are the biggest religions in the world. When we think of the story of Joseph, this is a story of recognizing that God is working through us. But even more than that, we think of the greatest sacrifice in the Bible. An ordinary man would look at the cross of Jesus and think about the victory that Satan had over humanity, and think about the victory of man. But it's that very suffering, that moment, that transformed this world. That suffering was turned into the shouldering of indemnity of this world for the sake of each and every one of us, so we could all have life. And each and every one of us in our daily lives, we carry a cross with us in some way, shape, or form. It could be as simple as going out on a jog and spraining your ankle. It could be as devastating as hearing that your loved one just contracted some kind of illness. These are all crosses we bear. Sometimes we can think of it as a curse, and many times it can feel that way. But let us think about the story that God wants to say through each and every one of us. Let us think about how that story, how these circumstances are shaping us for something greater, not just in our lives, but in the lives of others. In 2 Corinthians 4:17, It reads, "For this light momentary affliction is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison, as we look not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. For the things that are seen are transient, but the things that are unseen are eternal." And when I read this, it gives me so much peace. In the third temptation, when the devil came to Jesus, he asked Jesus to bow down to him, that he'll give him all the things of the world. And Satan wasn't lying. Satan did, in fact, own all the things of the world. But what did Jesus say? What did Jesus say? For what shall it profit a man to gain the whole world, but to lose his soul? Let us remember why we're here. Why we're here in this world. Many times we can see an affliction and think it's the end of the world. Many times we can see something bad happen and we can think it's the end of our world. But this world is not the end. There is something greater on the other side of life. And it's even hard to say on the other side because this is the side of life that it's around us, with us. The rich young ruler came to Jesus and he had done everything good. He said, "I'd followed the law." And Jesus said, "I need you to sell everything that you have and come follow me." And he said, the Bible says he went back in sorrow because he had too much to lose. Many of the time we think and we give so much weight to the moment. Give so much weight to today. Give so much weight to what we have that we forget that there is a tomorrow and there is an eternal life. It says, "For the things that are seen are transient, but the things that are unseen are eternal." So let us live a life that we can be proud of eternally. Let us live each moment with intention. Let us live each moment thinking of the blessings that we can bring forth to other people around us. Let us step out of the darkness and let us step into the light so that we can live on the brighter side. Thank you very much.